of them are here. That shows us that their commitments towards their duty, towards the country, towards the democracy. So it makes us happy that our finding, end of the day, it goes to them and the government. So they are the main stakeholders who can implement. So they are with us. Not only the elections commissions and the development partners, without them, we may not in a position to observe the elections and come up with our reports. So their contributions also so huge and significant, not only towards ANFREL, but the civil society and the engagement with the elections management body. And the backbone of ANFREL is our partners, the members in the ground level. So I'm really happy to recognize the member organizations who are doing the hard work in the country. We just come and go as ANFREL for a short period. But I think in these elections, we have been engaged with the local civil society and the elections commissions over 1 year. And we have done the pre-assessment also. But the reality and the real ground heroes are the local civil society. So I'm happy that many of our civil society colleagues also here. And the media, of course, they play a vital role. So I'm happy to, as a chair of ANFREL, to recognize all their contributions towards the last elections. So they are the real contributors, not the outsiders, like us. I mean, we did a small role during the elections period. So, as Tarendu said, I think we managed to cover the entire country and 8 regions during the pre-elections period. Unfortunately, we didn't have much time for pre-elections due to various reasons, but we covered the entire country, 8 regions, and I think somewhere around 70 plus coverage across the country during pre-elections, elections day, and of course the post-election period as well. Now, it's high time for us to look back what has happened, what need to be improved. I'm not going to elaborate all the recommendations because my 2 colleagues are ready with their formal presentations. They will bring us what are the key recommendations from ANFREL's side. But I think there are 2 types of recommendations. I mean, we can recognize in many different ways, short term, long term, but rather I'm happy to elaborate or highlight there are 2 types of recommendations. The number 1, which can be legal reforms. So it goes to the government and the parliament. But there are other the recommendations or other areas where we can improve the elections management body as well as the other stakeholders if we get together. So basically we met the elections commission yesterday and they were very welcome, our recommendations. Generally, I have seen as a chair of ANFREL, I have seen many elections management body, but I do respect my Sri Lankan Elections Commission because they are also very open. But very rarely the elections management body are open for outside people and welcoming the proposals. They are little defensive. I mean, that is the nature. But I am happy to say that when we meet them yesterday, that they were very welcome. Actually, they were welcome us even from the beginning. So we do have some hopes in the future. The elections commissions we are sure that they will do their best. with the previous experience and with the recommendations of ANFREL and other international observers group, as well as the local observers' recommendations. So the secret of success of previous elections, I mean, compare with the last 18 years, the Elections Commission was very open for stakeholders and very accommodative. All the civil society observers group, they welcomed the opinion, and they were transparent. I think that is one of the secrets that they build the trust among the public. So I'm happy to recognize those values of the Elections Commissions. Why I'm saying this, because we can see the significant difference compared with the past, and I have experience in many other Elections Commissions. So I just wanted to highlight that. So it will be real test for us in the upcoming local elections, which I have discussed with a couple of colleagues even over here, because the Elections Commissions run these elections with the interim government. Now we do have the clear, given the clear mandate to the government, and we have a legitimate government. So under the political leadership, we may have to run the upcoming local election. So I'm sure that if we work together, we can make significant difference again. The Elections Commission can't make magic by their own. They can lead the process. But I think each and every partners do have a specific role for upcoming the local elections. Once we build the elections culture, the peaceful elections culture, I think last elections has shown us the peaceful elections. And if we build that culture for at least next couple of elections, I'm sure that the Bangladesh people get the real opportunity in the future to elect their real representative, the quality representative. So with our recommendations, I think we will come up with our recommendations. I'm sure that the Elections Commissions and other stakeholders, our colleagues, those who are sitting here, and they will take it up for actions. Because ANFREL is not in a position to, I mean, we can support, but the real actors will be the local colleagues here. And the second level, the legal reforms, which should address by the government. So that is why we are planning to meet the government as well. So today, after this press briefing, we are going to meet the Speaker to share our recommendations, to share our findings with the government. And we will appeal the Speaker as well to address the legal reforms. I mean, we do not know whether they can do it before next local elections, but it is their responsibility now. I think people has given a clear mandate, and people has passed the referendum as well. So now it's duty of the government to respect the people's view, respect the people's mandate. So therefore, we will meet the government people, especially the Speaker, and share our findings. So we hope that coming years, the democracy will be more strength in Bangladesh. With that hope, I will pass the mic to my colleagues. They will bring us all the recommendations based on our observation.
Thank you, Johanna. So to continue the presentation of our report, so today, together with my colleague Carlo, we will be presenting 8 points with the report that you have right now. So it is divided into 8 points, and we will be discussing shortly our findings and recommendations. But just like what our head of mission mentioned, we were here more than a year ago. So we started doing coordination with different election monitoring organizations, doing election observation, and then at the same time with different development partners. So we've been here we provided capacity building training with them, and we continued with informal coordination group and meetings to build their confidence when they did the election observation last February. And at the same time, last November, we did a regional exchange where we brought different election commissions from Sri Lanka, Philippines, and then civil society organizations and partners in Indonesia to talk about 3 important topics. Because during that time, we were collaborating and discussing with the Election Commission what are the topics that we should still discuss, and they can strengthen their capacity internally. So we have discussed the use of generative AI, disinformation, and election observation. So that happened in November. And at the same time, we continued to work to strengthen citizen observation in the country. And we did our own monitoring as well as international observers. So allow me to discuss first the finding number 1 when it comes to the legal framework. So allow me to begin with the legal and institutional framework governing the 2026 parliamentary elections and referendum. So ANFREL observed that Bangladesh entered the electoral process with a relatively comprehensive legal framework, as you can see in the screen, anchored primarily, of course, in the Constitution, the Representation of the People Order of 1972, and various subsidiary regulations and administrative directives coming from the Bangladesh Election Commission. So as we assessed, of course, from the electoral integrity perspective, this reflects an important principle recognized under the international standards, that elections happened in Bangladesh, that it is conducted within a clear and stable legal framework that provided legal certainty, predictability, and equal application of rules. So ANFREL observed also several important regulatory developments, including the amendments to the election conduct rules, introduction of policies relating to polling center management, and of course, election observation. We also noted positive developments such as expanded postal voting mechanisms that potentially broaden participation opportunities and formal efforts to integrate accessibility considerations into polling center. So the legal framework also established provisions governing campaign conduct, political party regulation, election offenses, and of course, accreditation procedures, not only for domestic, but also for international observers. So these developments demonstrated an effort to respond to evolving electoral realities. However, international good practice also emphasizes that electoral legislation should avoid substantial changes close to election day, except where broad consensus exists to ensure sufficient preparation and understanding among stakeholders. So for this reason, of course, ANFREL recommends finalizing significant legal amendments sufficiently in advance of elections to strengthen predictability and implementation. We also encourage broader public education and stakeholder awareness initiatives on new regulations, stronger operational guidance on, of course, digital campaigning, because this is new, and online activities, enhanced transparency in accreditation procedures, which I will discuss later also in detail, and continued strengthening of accessibility implementation for persons with disabilities, older persons or the elderly, and other vulnerable groups throughout the electoral cycle. So that's with regard to the legal framework. And then for the election administration, so we have discussed this in detail. We sat down with the Election Commission yesterday, discussing the findings of the organization with regard to election administration. So of course, we have highlighted, ANFREL observed notable institutional and operational improvements throughout the electoral process. Because, of course, the Election Commission derived legitimacy not only from the legal mandates, but also from the public confidence in their impartiality, competence, and transparency. So the Bangladesh Election Commission, as we assessed, they entered this electoral cycle within a very unique institutional context following the transition in 2024 and subsequent changes in leadership intended to restore the confidence in the institution. We have mentioned yesterday that historically, public confidence in election administration faced challenges. However, during this electoral process, ANFREL observed considerable improvements resulting from the Commission's openness to reforms, procedural adjustments, and technical improvements. So the Election Commission demonstrated strong administrative capacity. See, we observed significant logistical preparations because we've seen, as we entered last year, during the start of the preparations, that we've seen the transformation of the Election Commission. So it involves election preparation, staffing, security coordination, voter facilitation arrangements, and management of concurrent electoral processes. So these efforts largely contributed to the generally peaceful election day and referendum. Importantly, confidence in the Election Commission remained relatively high among election officials, civil society organizations that we have interviewed, political parties, and candidates throughout the process. At the same time, public trust, of course, increasingly depends not only on effective administration, but also the standards on transparency and accountability. So we have noted, and as we have discussed yesterday, several areas that require further strengthening, including the post-election assessment mechanisms. We were also happy to hear yesterday to acknowledge that they've been doing post-election assessments in different areas. So that actually strengthened the analysis with regard to the initial findings that we had. And then at the same time, to improve the publication of detailed election information. So hopefully the Election Commission in the next years to come will adopt at least open data. So at least the data will not only be available in the website, but if you download it, civil society organizations, media, academia can easily crunch the data. No need to further request. So it will be better for the Election Commission to provide more detailed election information which can be available and accessible to public. And then, of course, we have relayed the concerns about the observer accreditation, but we also saw a lot of improvement when it comes to the procedure and questions relating to candidate affidavit verification. So overall, just like what we have mentioned, ANFREL assessment is that election administration demonstrated significant operational progress. But however, so we hope part of the recommendation is that hopefully the Election Commission will gain stronger institutional autonomy, increased transparency, and expanded stakeholder participation remain as part of the critical next steps. Okay. So when it comes to election observation, so this is the third point from my end. So of course, this is one of the strongest and core advocacy of ANFREL. Election observation remained as a critical component of transparency and public confidence in electoral processes. We entered last year doing a lot of mapping of stakeholders, assessing at least civil society organizations that we have engaged with. So we will have this better scrutiny and better judgment to improve non-partisanship and independence of different civil society organizations. And with the DOP standards that we have been following as international election observers, we recognize that independent observation contributes to transparency, accountability, and public trust. We are actually very happy on how the civil society organization transformed into different coalitions, or even if not part of any coalition, but we saw independent efforts doing election observation formally and informally. We are saying formally because they underwent accreditation. But there were also organizations who were not accredited that time, but they are very willing to do citizen observation because that's a right available for every citizen in the country to do citizen observation. So we have observed positive developments in that regard. So you can see the numbers that have been accredited. There were 81 domestic observer organizations and 55,000 domestic observers that were deployed in the Bangladesh electoral history. So of course, this demonstrated an important commitment toward openness and broader stakeholder participations. However, of course, ANFREL observed that election observation in practice involved a more complex process than what exists formally in law. So while observation is administered by the Election Commission, of course, we still saw the challenges, just like what we have discussed with them, with regard to the additional procedure involving other approval mechanism that created a dual-layer process that affected at least the domestic election observers. So, of course, there have been mentioned about the dual-layer process, and at the same time, we also acknowledge that observation remained largely focused on election day rather than the full electoral cycle. We're not saying all, but at least most of the organizations that we have engaged with. But to note, we have seen the improvement because they've deployed long-term observers ahead of the elections without any formal accreditation process. Because, of course, the procedures say otherwise, that they can only be deployed formally 3 days before the elections. So for these reasons, of course, we have mentioned this recommendation yesterday, that hopefully the Election Commission would improve the accreditation transparency. They have discussed with us also their own internal challenges on how they actually assess each organization, so for them to be accredited. So for us, hopefully there will be more standardized rules, so not only to recognize the definition of electoral process, but at least across the provisions it will be consistent, that the accreditation will be provided for long-term observers, allowing citizen observers to do monitoring in the different stages of electoral cycle. And of course, hopefully, to build the technical capacity, hopefully our development partners will also be interested to institutionalize this kind of training inside. So at least to train observers in evidence-based monitoring, data collection, and sample-based observation methods to improve efficiency, and ensure full access, because of course we have experienced that we have limited time of observation in a particular polling center. So hopefully in the next election cycle, Election Commission can guarantee observer access to polling counting, tabulation, and results transmission processes, because we have seen the peaceful election day and referendum, because we also understand the limitation that we cannot do stationary observation. But with the recent elections and referendum, hopefully there will be a compromise with regard to that, with regard to peacefulness, and at the same time with the full access of observation. Lastly, from my end, we conducted, of course, social media monitoring for these elections. So we have partnered with Activate Rights to do social media monitoring. So we have used a tool, the Junkipedia tool, to do this social media monitoring. So for us, this is the second systematic social media monitoring, because the first one that we did was during the Philippines 2025 national and local elections. So for this cycle, we have monitored 91,000 posts across Facebook, Telegram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. And we coded a representative sample of 5,000 posts from different political actors, candidates, media, civil society organizations, and fact-checking entities. So the findings present a largely encouraging picture. Approximately 94% of coded content was election-related. And surprisingly, democratic content significantly outweighed undemocratic content. So you would imagine how active the social media platforms were during the election cycle. So the democratic content that we saw included campaign messaging, civic education, voter mobilization, and policy discussions. So major political actors, just like what you can see in the screen, use digital platforms to discuss themes such as governance reforms, anti-corruption measures, youth participation, economic development, human rights, and institutional reform. So these are actually the numbers, the actual numbers with regard to the campaign-related coding item and post per public policy team. You can see that also in the report. But however, we have identified concerning trends. You can see in the screen, this included the organized boycott efforts such as the no vote campaign, religious narratives, discouraging electoral participation, fraud, or instability. So of course, these anti-democratic narratives represented in the 91 posts that we have seen, it represented a relatively small proportion of the broader online environment, and their potential impact should not be, but it should not be underestimated, their potential impact, because research increasingly demonstrated that even limited harmful content can disproportionately influence public trust, social cohesion, and perceptions of legitimacy. So of course, part of the recommendations that I will mention, of course, is that we have discussed this during the November regional exchange. So hopefully, coming from the Election Commission, because we have seen their efforts doing e-monitoring. So hopefully, this kind of effort will continue coming from the Election Commission, institutionalized, just like what you saw in different election commissions who attended the November regional exchange, institutionalize a particular unit or committee just doing social media monitoring, because that's the current trend right now. And hopefully the policy will be more responsive when it comes to digital campaigning. You would see different practices and efforts coming from the Election Commission. So hopefully part of our recommendation is for the Election Commission to continue that kind of effort. And for the civil society organizations and media organizations to continue and don't stop actually doing social media monitoring. It takes a lot of effort, but if you got the hang of it already, having a tool with you, it's actually more easier for observers like us to do such kind of monitoring. So I'll stop from here because those are the 4 points coming from my end. I'll pass on the microphone to Carlo to discuss the remaining 4 points. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Briza. The 5th point I'll go through will be electoral accountability, particularly money politics, campaign finance, security environment, and complaints handling mechanisms. One of the issues we wanted to highlight is money politics and campaign finance. We wanted to highlight weak regulation in terms of campaign finance, particularly on 2 things. We saw a lot of violations when it comes to the code of conduct, and there was a wide perception of overspending among electoral contestants. And as you can see later on, this initially impacts so many different things from inclusion, accountability, and the general public confidence when it comes to the election. One vulnerability we also wanted to highlight is the voter slip as a potential vulnerability for vote buying and improper influence of voters. So this can be used as evidence, or this can be used as a way for electoral contestants to ensure that voters are voting following unlawful exchanges. Something that we also wanted to highlight is election-related violence and muscle power. there was a marked difference before the election and during election day. Before the election, we saw widespread inter-party and intra-party violence, which fortunately on election day, due to the efforts of the electoral commissions and various stakeholders, election day was largely peaceful due to the strong security coordination and monitoring measures. For complaints handling, many stakeholders reported inconsistent complaints processes, including uncertainty over the filing, escalation process, timelines, and outcomes. And stakeholders felt a lack of transparency on complaint handling status. So for our recommendations, one clear recommendation for us is to ban partisan voter assistance. So the recommendation is to remove party-run voter desks outside of our polling centers, which do voter slip distribution, and instead set up official non-partisan voter help desks for information and assistance. This way, you're able to include transparency by allowing voters information needed to vote, while also cutting out the vulnerability when it comes to the voter slip undue influence. Third is to strengthen campaign finance enforcement, particularly the conduct of post-election audits in terms of spending, verifying disclosures, and publishing violations and sanctions. Next is we are recommending to clarify the complaints process and to publish enforcement outcomes. So publish a simple, transparent guide on filing, timelines, evidence needed, and escalation procedures, while also later on ensuring follow-through on potential violations during the election period. And lastly, we would want to applaud the use of the security tools for transparency, particularly the use of CCTVs and body cams, as we felt this was significantly contributed to the lack of election day violence. So we are recommending the institutionalization of the use of these security tools for not just election day, but to consider even the usage of greater forms of transparency with advanced technology for the broader election period. On the matter of inclusion, for women participation, it was still low. Only 3.93% of candidates were women, with only 7 women directly elected. And we were able to observe over 30 political parties fielded no women candidates. We were able to identify 3 particular structural barriers. First is limited party nominations. Second is high campaign costs. And third is cyber harassment. Going into the earlier discussion on campaign finance, a very important thing to consider to increase participation is to ensure stronger campaign finance regulation and enforcement. On youth participation, we were able to note that youth participation in the 2026 Bangladesh elections were highly visible, with over 4.5 million first-time voters added to the electoral roll. However, representation were limited to voting, with only 12 MPs who were young, with just 3% aged at 25 to 34 years old, and 6.73% aged at 35 to 44 years old. When it comes to the HIJA, or gender diverse groups, we saw a gradual inclusion. So we had over 1,200 registered transgender voters, including first-time voters. However, there's only one known HIJA candidate which contested, but later on withdrew, citing the need for reserved seats for meaningful inclusion. And we saw not much visible gender diverse candidates campaigning during the campaign process. For minority and marginalized communities, as with the overall theme, participation remains largely voter-based rather than candidate-based. So for religious and ethnic minorities, for example, even though they represent around 10% of the population, only 3.91% were candidates during the election, and with 29 political parties fielding no candidates from minority or marginalized communities. When it comes to persons with disabilities, again, there's 2 different trends here. One important positive trend is we saw before the election day, there was strong inclusion, especially because of the attention provided to making sure that persons with disabilities were able to exercise the right to vote. So the openness of the Electoral Commission to coordinate and to partner with multiple organizations, both internationally and domestically, contributed to awareness and capacity building efforts, including mock polling initiatives and institutional support for disability and inclusion. However, structural barriers remain on election day. Among the 502 observed polling centers by ANFREL, 71% had no ramps, and 68% lacked wheelchair access, and 43% were identified to have mobility hazards. So the recommendations here is for Parliament to, one, pass legislation expanding inclusive political participation. As mentioned, the issues here are structural. So the proposed solutions need to be structural as well, including quotas and reforms to ensure meaningful representation of women, youth, minorities, persons with disabilities, and gender diverse groups. Part of this is to support equitable competition, particularly considering providing campaign finance support, including subsidies, campaign subsidies for women candidates, and requiring fair allocation of party resources to reduce structural and financial barriers. And we also recommend to strengthen institutional accountability for inclusion, consider the creation of a dedicated inclusiveness and accessibility unit within the Bangladesh Election Commission to oversee the implementation and protection of vulnerable groups' electoral rights. As mentioned, with regard to the accessibility of polling centers, it will be important for Parliament and the BEC, together with other stakeholders, including our schools, to improve accessibility in vote inclusion, particularly establishing mandatory accessibility standards and alternative voting arrangements, particularly for elderly voters and persons with disabilities. And of course, the long-term solution here would be to include upgraded polling infrastructure and voter support systems. And for the Electoral Commission to strengthen safety and protection, including enhancing monitoring enforcement mechanisms to prevent electoral violence digitally and in person. Secondly, is promote youth engagement and minority inclusion. So institutionalize the youth consultation mechanisms already present and to expand civic education and to apply targeted measures in minority concentrated areas. For voter education and awareness, we would want to highlight that voter education in elections were largely successful, but with room for improvement. So first, we saw that a lot of voters had the basic understanding of the voting process. It was clear to them how to vote. However, for future elections, it would be beneficial to encourage more knowledge in terms of counting, verification, and the post-election process. There's also high awareness when it comes to parties and candidates. However, understanding of manifestos and party platforms remained low. Voters were also informed of the referendum, that they had to vote. There's a separate voting procedure for them. However, gaps were evident regarding the actual referendum content, particularly for marginalized communities. And social media emerged as one of the dominant information sources for this election. However, as mentioned earlier, misinformation is still widespread. For recommendations, we have two simple recommendations. One is to simplify or to have simplified voter education materials, particularly for marginalized communities, and to institutionalize the already built civil society partnerships that was already built for this election to expand outreach and counter misinformation directly. For the post-election governance, we were able to identify three particular points. First is that elections experience a very active participation and were generally peaceful, particularly on election day. However, of course, there were still conversations about perceptions of political inclusiveness and electoral competition due to the suspension of Awami League under the Anti-Terrorism Act. Post-election focus shifted towards implementation of the July Charter reforms and transitional justice processes. So it's very important to ensure that because the referendum won with 60% of the vote, delays and disputes and lack of consensus on the implementation of the referendum would risk weakening public trust on the process. So our recommendations is two. One is to adopt a rights-based transition approach, which includes promotion of truth, justice, reparations, and non-recurrence while avoiding exclusionary practices. And for the July Charter Roadmap, there has to be a published, time-bound roadmap which defines milestones, responsible institutions, and implementation guidelines. So this ends our 8 points. I think we would now open we're now open for discussion for questions and answers.
Yep. Thank you very much, Rohan, Breeza, and Af. So we would like to open the floor for your questions. We will go first with members from media, and then we will open for the other stakeholders also to raise your questions, and our speakers, they are happy to answer those questions. So you can raise your hand if you have any questions, and then my colleagues will bring the mic to you. We have no questions from members from media. So we'll open it to everyone. For other stakeholders also can raise your questions. Yes, we have one.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Actually, I just want to know that can we include as a part of our advocacy, especially during the electoral campaigning. I just want to ask you that accessible campaigning is also necessary, especially if we want to ensure the voting rights of persons with disabilities. Because during this election, I have noticed that deaf people and other persons with disabilities are not being included, and they don't know about the electoral agendas of the political parties. So that was my question, and thank you for this vibrant presentation as well.
You can also mention your name and your organization as well.
Sorry, extremely sorry. I'm Ibnu Ahmed, President of Dhaka University Support for Students with Disabilities. Thank you again.
Do we have any other questions? Maybe the panel can already answer.
Well, I think it's a very valid questions. But accessibility issues is everywhere. I'm not justifying here. I think almost all the countries in Asia, we do have that accessibility issue because the Elections Commission basically use the existing infrastructure. But that doesn't mean that we should not serious about it. But the many countries, I mean, I can say two things, basically. The Elections Commission can have a long-term plan on the polling stations, how we can make accessibility, identify the more accessible places for elections as a polling station. It is not easy. It's a long-term plan. And the short term, and at least we can, because we have seen that, I think we have discussed with the chair also, that some of the polling stations, they have used the upper floor as a polling place rather than taking the ground floor. And I think the school management and various other, I mean, wherever we select the places, so there are administrative structures and permissions. It may be a problem. So we have to have some sort of discussions with that in the relevant places where we can resolve in certain extent. And some places we can introduce ramp for accessibility. And some countries, they have a different mechanism, and they call it, they have some advanced warning mechanism for those who are elderly people and the disabled people. Sometimes the elections commissions, their officers are visit house to house, get their vote. The different mechanism used by the different countries and different election administrations. So I think we can get all these experience from across, at least across Asia or across the world, and we can look at in a positive way how we can improve in the short term, what we can do for upcoming local elections in short-term measures. And the long term, the government also need to be involved. At least when they build the government building in the future, there should be a policy for accessibility for the disabled, because it's not only the disabled per se, but elderly people also. I mean, what is the percentage of elderly people? Each and every country is largely big portion. So we need to serious on that, but I really appreciate that questions.
And also, I think the question also touched on during the campaign period, how they can access the campaign promises from different candidates and political parties for people with disabilities, right?
So it was really such a beautiful comment, to be honest. I think what we did notice for this election was just going into the context of, because elections have happened such a long time ago, so we saw a stronger emphasis on the how to vote. Who to vote for, I think, is a great next step, particularly maybe even having requirements for sign languages, for accessibility measures during the campaign period. But I think that's a very important thing to consider for future elections. Because what we did notice here was a stronger emphasis on getting or really teaching people how to vote for the first time, because there were many first-time voters for this election. But again, beautiful comment, and I think it's very important to emphasize that for future elections.
Yeah. We have two more questions. One from...
My name is Salim. I have been working in the field of elections for long. I have both questions and comments. The question is, you recommended that to the Parliament, the recommendation is made to the Parliament to strengthen the autonomy of the Election Commission. How? Do you have any specific recommendation how actually this needs to be done? This is a question. Another thing, other question is, this is also you recommended in terms of women participation. I think you mentioned that only a very low percentage of women was nominated in the last elections, which is a shame for us. Even if you see the previous elections, which was held, which was not credible, the women participation was higher than the last election. And in the July Charter, all the political parties agreed to nominate at least 5% women in the upcoming election, that's been February 12 elections. But most of the political parties did not implement this commitment. So I think along with your recommendation, in terms of legislation, I think political parties also can take some initiatives to do the voluntary candidate quota. This is also good practice in some countries of the world, in many countries of the world. So this is one of the things. Another thing is campaign finance issue. This is one of the areas where we need to work more and more. That is the term actually I want to use. Because compared to many other countries, Indonesia and other countries, we are lagging behind. So this is a very important area. In terms of voter slip distribution, yes. This has been a long discussion in Bangladesh. Because this not only is one kind of campaign, sometimes this creates violence surrounding the polling station. So we need to think about this issue, about an alternative. And in terms of strengthen the capacity of the domestic observer, the quality you mentioned, yes, we are also very much lagging behind in this area. And then I always tell, there are some civil society organizations who observe election here. I'm sorry to them. I always tell that in Bangladesh, election observation is not professionalized yet, similar to many other countries. So both Election Commission and the civil society organization need to work together. This is one of the areas, and ANFREL can help. I actually did not find one thing I was expecting, that I did not see any gender segregated data. The recommendation on gender segregated data. For example, if you ask Election Commission, what is the female turnout or male turnout? There is no data, which is available in Nepal. Right? And other thing, if you ask Election Commission about the Election Commission deploy huge number of polling personnel, I mean presiding officer, assistant presiding officer, polling officer. If you ask Election Commission the ratio of male and female, I think data is not available. So we need to address these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we can answer the first question that.
Hello, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Alim, for the questions and comment in combination. So allow me to answer your question about the Election Commission and how to strengthen it. So best practice and international standard and how you strengthen autonomy of an election commission. One, of course, is with regard to the appointment measures. So strengthen the independent and transparency of appointment process. Second, guarantee security of tenure, especially if it's in the Constitution. Once, of course, the good practice is if an office is a constitutional commission, you guarantee security tenure of the election commissioners. And at the same time, you make it very open on how the appointment process is being done. Third is with regard to fiscal autonomy. That has been a problem across the region, an election commission having or without any fiscal autonomy, because that would strengthen the independence and the impartiality of an institution. And that's how you protect also a democratic institution. Your question about election observation, I'll be happy to answer that. Actually, we're very happy to see a lot of improvements because we've seen from the very start that many efforts before were not consolidated. Although if you have asked different civil society organizations, they have that commitment. But I would say, at least for ANFREL assessment for 1 year, we made the efforts along with different civil society organizations. Methodology has been improved. We've seen an actual implementation with sample-based observation, and we were very happy to saw that. Along with the general election monitoring, we were also very happy to see inclusion theme monitoring. We've seen monitoring focus on electoral violence, inclusion, marginalized, and then social media or digital campaigning. I would say there's an advanced or a step forward at least to see this, because that's how we actually gradually progress, even us in ANFREL. We started as a traditional election observers, but we've been investing a lot in capacity building to learn a lot with this thematic monitoring. So I would say there's an advanced progress, and hopefully it will be continued.
I'll respond to the issues on the women, campaign finance and voter slip. But first of all, appreciate the feedback as usual. We do agree the issue on women is really structural, cultural issues. I think that's why we're also proposing quotas, just to make sure that it happens. But as you mentioned, it doesn't happen. So the way we're also recommending here, there are two general ways to shift behavior in terms of political parties. Because when we talk to different political parties before the election, one of the reasons they mentioned as to why a lesser tendency for them to field women candidates is winnability. So part of the carrot and stick approach would be maybe you produce carrots to shift behavior of political parties. So how could this happen? You could increase, for example, campaign spending limits for political parties when it comes to women participation or women candidates, or include campaign finance subsidies that allow women to actually campaign further. But this also connects to the stick portion, which you have to be also very strict when it comes to existing regulation for campaign finance. Because the women candidates that we were able to talk to, they mentioned that it will be difficult for them to compete because they didn't have the financial capacity to be able to compete in elections. But that comes with the perception that if the campaign finance limit is not actually enforced, it's difficult for them to compete even further. So these are, in essence, not just about the quota, but there are multiple barriers existing, which we feel if you shift these levers, you can increase women participation further and even participation of other minorities as well. With regard to the voter slip issue, when we observed, when our observers went around the country, it jumped out to us that it would be a really clear vulnerability. So we are happy to hear there are already conversations about it. What we've seen in other countries, we understand the balance of ensuring every voter is able to exercise their right with the information that they need, while also making sure that it's non-partisan. That's why we're recommending to ban partisan voter desks and maybe have non-partisan desks there. We did see a lot of volunteers on election day helping elderly, helping persons with disabilities go up to the different flights of stairs. So maybe part of the recommendation here would be to shift some of that assistance to voter assistance desks as well, providing information to voters to be able to actually vote on election day. Thank you so much.
Okay. We have 2 more questions now. 3, 4. We'll start from the front. Yeah.
Thank you. Many thanks, ANFREL, for organizing this final briefing, and thanks all the panelists. My name is Haruna Rashid. I work for Lighthouse and Member Secretary of Alliance for Fair Election and Democracy, AFED. I see this, your presentation is very exhaustive, and all this, I think, more the issue have been covered, I believe. I didn't see one thing that still we are struggling, that despite all this arrangement and having good elections, it is definitely credible. But some people, there is some speculation about the result, declaration of results. So I try to identify what is actually happening during declaration in the returning officer office. That is, the issue is how the tabulation system is placed over there. Our observers is not being able to give a correct answer. But some of the issue we have found that, okay, sometimes returning officer takes some breaks, and after that, he again start declaration. No harm, but what happened there, that is not answered yet. So do you have any specific observations? This is one question. Second is my friend Fellows from Democracy was, he also reminded me the 10 taka for per voter regarding the campaign directions or campaign purpose. But there is no monitoring mechanism whether this money they are spending as per this guideline. But maybe this can be, maybe CEC Sharik is here. He can be maybe keep in mind for future. But my question is to you, the first one. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. So we did find, in terms of tabulation or the counting process, there were a bit of inconsistency. So observers identified inconsistencies as to how the counting actually happened. But overall, despite inconsistencies, I think there was confidence in accuracy in terms of the counting. So one of our recommendations would be to have a clear set of rules considering the practical aspects of things. So for example, in one of the errors observed, they took a break to have to eat before they actually start counting. But this was, of course, not part of, it's not found in the rules. So taking into consideration these practical aspects will be important in providing very clear and consistent rules across the multiple counting centers, so that there will be greater consistency and less doubt in terms of what actually happened. But at least in the areas that we observed, there was trust in terms of the final counting process as well. In terms of the monitoring process, mechanism for campaign finance, we do agree it's something that's heavily needed here. One thing that might be considered right now, campaign finance reports is required to be submitted only after the elections. One thing that can be considered would be to have a mid-report in between the campaign finance period, just to see how different parties are able to actually spend during the election period or during the campaign period. And we do understand we have to take into consideration capacity and context of the institutions here. So one thing that can be considered as well would be a random audit for specific parties or specific candidates in terms of whether there's accuracy in terms of the campaign finance report that they actually submitted. But we do agree there needs to be a stronger emphasis when it comes to monitoring of the campaign finance aspect.
I will just answer with regard to counting, especially that the standard for counting, it should be made in public. So hopefully, gradually, because of course we understand the security environment and the situation that has been very paramount in the upcoming, with the February elections and referendum, but hopefully gradually, because we can push further that the counting should be open to public. So at least that standard, because you open that not only for observers, media, and parties, but for citizens to observe the counting. Because I myself was not able to observe the counting because I did not meet the time where should I be inside. So I tried many times, but the security was very strict also. But I tried to at least watch the counting, but I wasn't able to do. So I hope that it will be open to the public gradually. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, we have one question.
Just a couple of comments and then a question. Firstly, I would just like to congratulate the election commissioner and the secretary for a very credible election. I think just having, we are sitting here peacefully now. We don't remember how important it was for this country, and it is large population. I come from Australia, which is, about 26, 27 million people, but population this size, having an election, just delivering the election itself was a miracle. Many, many people, many different organizations had doubted. So to the election commissioner and the secretary, I am sure the nation is grateful, and thank you. You have delivered such a big promise to the nation and to the democracy. I'm sure it will improve, from here on. And with all the ups and downs, just delivering the election was a huge deal. So thank you. To ANFREL, I would suggest thank you for having the observers and for the report and launching it today. I'm sure the recommendations will be taken up with the new government. So the question that I have is, which not a lot gets spoken about, but it was also a new area during the election, was the postal election, particularly the overseas postal election. So if you have any observations in relation to that, how was it? Was it useful? Did it make any difference to the overall results? And what should be done to improve it in future? So thank you.
I think it was commendable for actually the Election Commission to really have to launch the postal voting process. But I think based on our analysis is that it was generally successful considering the context, the fact it was the first time. And I think the next goal for it would be to expand it, to make sure that more people are able to vote and more people are aware of the postal voting process.
Yes, we have two more questions from media. Yeah, we'll go with, yes.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Mohsin. I'm a journalist. So let me first give you the context. Like, there is a rule and law in Bangladesh. Whoever is a loan defaulter, he will be not allowed to participate in the election. So during the election time, we have seen the Election Commission has cherry-picked these loan defaulters. Some were able to participate in the election and some were not. So my question to you, so do you think the Election Commission was impartial during the election? Thank you.
Yeah, so of course, I would start with our methodology as well. So when we provide analysis, it should be holistic, talking about the different segments of the areas of focus. So to answer your question, yes, the Bangladesh Election Commission has been very impartial and we have seen the improvement. But of course, we have taken note also your concerns. And hopefully, because they are here, hopefully you will address it directly, especially with the challenges when it comes to media.
So do you feel and do you think, despite cherry-picking the loan defaulter, Election Commission was impartial?
Yes, but not the cherry picking, because we have not seen and observed that. but we acknowledge the challenges. Yeah.
Yeah. We have one more question from the media.
Hello, I'm Sadia from 18 News. You have mentioned your observation about the irregularities of ballot box opening or vote counting. So I want to know that how many incidents of irregularities you have observed in vote counting or ballot box opening?
So in the areas that we observed, our observers did not observe any issues when it comes to counting and ballot box opening. So I think, at least with the areas that we did observe, we did not find any inconsistencies or any irregularities.
So we can give opportunity to just one more question, if anyone.
So my question is, from your research or your report, in the next local government election is coming. So from the lessons of this election, what should be implemented on that election so we can get a more inclusive and a transparent election? Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, I will start. So probably from the 4 points that I have discussed, one that should be continued is the timely communication and regular communication coming from the Election Commission. That should be continued because that's one good standard and practice. So at least it's not only applicable for a national elections or referendum, it should also be applicable to any kinds of election. Second is with regard to the election day itself, because in short term, you can at least address those gaps and inconsistencies when it comes to the implementation. I think that has been her question with regard to inconsistencies. We have highlighted inconsistencies with local implementation. So it will reflect to the kind of training that the election staff has underwent. So to continue that kind of consistency, giving training to the polling staff who will handle the elections, and at the same time address the immediate concerns of the vulnerable population when it comes to voting. And then for a voter awareness and education, though hopefully it will not more focus only on how to vote, but to the substance. What's the essence of the voting for local elections, how it will impact the kind of governance and the reforms that you want to pursue on the ground. So yeah, but you may want to add at least.
Yeah, I think it's very important for the Electoral Commission to build on what is already built right now. So there's so many good things that already happened for this election, including the openness of the Electoral Commission to really work with multiple stakeholders, whether domestic organizations or international organizations or media, or even voters specifically. So it's very important going into the next election to continue working or building with what are already started for this election, including stronger voter education. The training was already mentioned of the local election officers, but even the training of CSOs and observer groups would be very important to build on everything that's happened for this election. But if it would be possible to start considering, for example, the voter slips, that's something that might be good to already start considering revising. And in terms of campaign finance, if that's something that can be piloted in terms of monitoring or implementing a monitoring mechanisms, just even a pilot to be a good thing to consider in preparation for the future parliament elections.
I may wish to add maybe the last point. We are not saying here that the Bangladesh election is perfect, because nowhere you can find the perfect elections. So, but we have to look at the overall picture. And we always look at the international standard And also, we compare with the previous elections or the other countries. I mean, if you look at the overall picture in Bangladesh, looking at the history of Bangladesh, I think this is the significant elections. And the credit should go to the Elections Commission. There's no doubt about it from our end. There can be some mistakes. There is a room for improvement, so that is why we make our own recommendations in different sectors and for different stakeholders, including the Elections Commissions. When you say the election, we call it, it should be inclusive elections. That means each and every citizens should have opportunity to exercise their right. That is basically we say, right? The democracy is improving, but we have a good hope with these elections. The elections commissions, the elections management, they managed to build the trust among the public. I'm not saying again this, it's perfect. There can be a room for improvement. But I think it is unfair if you are not saying that the elections commissions didn't, and they committed to have the better election for Bangladesh after a long period under the interim government. That is why I said that the next elections will be again test for us. But when we met the Elections Commission yesterday, we realized that they do have a plan and they still trying to continue what they did, and upcoming local elections also, whatever the challenges they face, I think they are ready, they are preparing for that. So we do have a good hope with the elections.
Have a hope for the democracy, and then the electoral process Bangladesh will continue to progress. So as ANFREL, that we will also continue to observe, and then we will also do our contribution as much as possible as well. So with that, I think thank you very much for your participation. Especially we would like to acknowledge the presence of Chief Election Commissioner and also the Senior Secretary to the Election Commission of Bangladesh. I would like to invite the Chief Election Commissioner also to make a small remark at this moment after we talk about the challenges and also the improvements of past election in Bangladesh.
Nothing is free, you know. Even the tea is also not free. Now I find it. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My friends from ANFREL, who are on the dais and also who are on the floor, distinguished civil society representatives, members of the media, Assalamu alaikum. I don't spell the names because I may misspell, you know, misspell in the names because too long for me, you know, the name is too long for me. That's why I had done that way. And there, when I entered, there was a request from the media that when I speak, I should speak in Bangla also, because for them. So I will be speaking a mixed language. Last night I had been to the reception hosted by the U.S. Embassy on the occasion of their 250th anniversary of USA. There the Honorable Ambassador, His Excellency the Ambassador, U.S. Ambassador, he gave most of his speech in Bangla. In Bangla. It's very good, you know, I liked his idea. Anyway, I must welcome and thank the ANFREL for a very exhaustive and to the point report. Exhaustive but to the point, comprehensive but to the point report. We don't need to really look around to find out the gist of what you have written, because very specific comments and suggestions you have given, covering almost all conceivable areas related to election. It is rather not an observation report, it is rather a scan report, you know. You have scanned the whole electoral process that we have undertaken, you know. And definitely the recommendations are welcoming. আমাদের কাছে এটা খুব গ্রহণযোগ্য, acceptable, and we will definitely explore যেগুলো আমরা গ্রহণ করতে পারি আমাদের সিস্টেমটাকে ইমপ্রুভ করার জন্য, সেটা আমরা ডেফিনেটলি নেব। আমাদের তো আরএফইডির মেম্বাররা এখানে আছেন, দেয়ার ইজ এ পার্মানেন্ট অবজারভেশন মিশন named RFED in the election commission itself. It's a permanent mission, you know. They observe each and every steps we take related to election. And we are very happy about it. Because particularly, as I said in another meeting, whatever decision we take, it is immediately communicated to the whole nation through RFED members. So it's a great contribution you are also making to the electoral process. I must accept that. RFED যারা সদস্য আছেন, আমরা আমাদের সচিব মহোদয় অথবা আমাদের কোনো কমিশনার যখন ব্রিফ করেন, আপনারা সাথে সাথে এটা মিডিয়াতে দিয়ে দেন। দিলে হয় কি আমাদের বক্তব্যটা ইমিডিয়েটলি পৌঁছে যায়, সারা জাতির কাছে পৌঁছে যায়। যেটা আমরা প্রচার করতে চাই এটা ইমিডিয়েটলি পৌঁছে যায় এবং বিনা খরচায়, অনেকটা বিনা খরচায়, বিনা উইদাউট স্পেন্ডিং এ সিঙ্গেল ফার্দিং ইউ আন্ডারটেক দি রেসপন্সিবিলিটি। এবং এটা আমাদের জন্য একটা বিরাট প্রাপ্তি বলবো। ইনফ্যাক্ট ইউ আর অলসো এ পার্টনার ইন দ্য হোল প্রসেস। কারণ এটা তো আপনারা একটা জিনিস মনে রাখবেন, যেটা আমার মাথার মধ্যে সবসময় কাজ করে, অ্যাপার্ট ফ্রম বিইং সিইসি হওয়া ছাড়াও আমি তো এই দেশের একজন নাগরিক। আমারও তো স্টেক আছে, আমারও ছেলে মেয়ে আছে, আমারও পরিবার আছে। আমিও তো এই দেশের ভবিষ্যৎ চাই। আমি একটা দেশের নাগরিক হিসাবেও তো আমার একটা দায়িত্ব আছে না। সিইসি হিসাবে আমার তো এডিশনাল রেসপন্সিবিলিটি। সুতরাং এই দেশের কিসে মঙ্গল, কিসে ভালো, এটা নিয়ে সর্বক্ষণ আমাকে ভাবা হয়। এটা কিন্তু যদি আমি সিইসি নাও হতাম, তাও সারাদিন বাসায় বসে বসে চিন্তা করতাম। ফেসবুকে লেখালেখি করেছি, অনেক লেখালেখি করেছি এই আবার কোভিডের সময় থেকে আরম্ভ করে। বিকজ আই ওয়াজ সেক্রেটারি মিনিস্ট্রি অফ হেলথ, সো আই থট আমার যে একটা দায়িত্ব আছে, অনেক পরামর্শ সরকারকে দিয়েছি আমি কোভিডের সময় থ্রু ফেসবুক। অনেক পরামর্শ দিয়েছি, অনেকগুলো তারা নিয়েছে, অনেকগুলো নেয়নি। কারণ হেলথ সেক্রেটারি হিসেবে আমি মনে করলাম যে এটা আমার একটা করা দরকার। তো যখনই আমি থেকেছি, আমি যে কোনো সিচুয়েশনে আমি দেশের জন্য মঙ্গলটা চিন্তা করি। সিইসি হিসাবে তো আমার যখন দায়িত্ব কাঁধে এসে পড়েছে, তখন তো এই ইলেকট্রাল প্রসেসটাকে এগিয়ে নিয়ে যাওয়ার জন্য এখানে আমার বলতে দ্বিধা নেই। আমি চাচ্ছিলাম যে একটা নির্বাচিত সরকারের কাছে ক্ষমতাটা যাক, জনগণের প্রতিনিধির কাছে ক্ষমতাটা যাক, অ্যান্ড লেট দেম হ্যান্ডেল দ্য সিচুয়েশন। কারণ একটা কেয়ারটেকার গভর্নমেন্ট বা ইন্টারিম গভর্নমেন্ট ইয়ার্স টুগেদার চলতে পারে না আর কোনো দেশে। এটা নট অ্যাকসেপ্টেবল যে একটা বছরের পর বছর একটা চলবে। তখন গণতান্ত্রিক সরকার আসতেই হবে। দ্যাট ইজ দ্য অনলি প্রসেস, ডেমোক্রেটিক সিস্টেম ইজ দ্য অনলি প্রসেস যেটার মাধ্যমে সব ইস্যুসগুলো অ্যাড্রেস করা যায়, দেশের উন্নয়নটা এনশিওর করা যায়। আমরা যখন দায়িত্ব নিয়ে শপথ নেই, যেদিন শপথ গ্রহণ করি, তখন আমাকে আপনারা সাংবাদিক ভাইয়েরা প্রশ্ন করেছিলেন যে আপনার যে দায়িত্ব নিলেন ইটস ভেরি চ্যালেঞ্জিং, আপনি কি পারবেন এই চ্যালেঞ্জ মোকাবেলা করতে? তো আমি বলেছিলাম চ্যালেঞ্জ মোকাবেলা করার অভিজ্ঞতা এবং সাহস আমার আছে। অভিজ্ঞতাও আছে যেহেতু আমি তিনটা মন্ত্রণালয়ের সচিব হিসাবে কাজ করেছি, এনার্জি মিনিস্ট্রি, হেলথ মিনিস্ট্রি, ইনফরমেশন মিনিস্ট্রি। কারণ চ্যালেঞ্জ মোকাবেলার অভিজ্ঞতা আমার যথেষ্ট আছে এবং সাহসও আমার আল্লাহর রহমত আছে। এই দুইটা ইউজ করে আমার সবার সহযোগিতা নিয়ে সব চ্যালেঞ্জ মোকাবেলা করে কিন্তু এই ইলেকশনটা আমরা ডেলিভার করেছি। সবার সহযোগিতা পেয়েছি, কেউ রিফিউজ করে নাই, নোবডি রিফিউজ টু অ্যাসিস্ট আস। আমরা যখনই রিকোয়েস্ট করেছি সবাই সহযোগিতা করছে, সাংবাদিক থেকে আরম্ভ করে, ভোটার থেকে আরম্ভ করে, গভর্নমেন্ট, ইন্টারিম গভর্নমেন্ট সবাই সহযোগিতা করেছে। এই সহযোগিতা না হলে তো পারা যেত না। এখন আমাদের সামনে বিরাট চ্যালেঞ্জ হিসাবে দেখা দিয়েছে হলো এই যে লোকাল গভর্নমেন্ট ইলেকশন। এখানে তো ধরেন আমাদের 4,581টা ইউনিয়ন, 4,581টা ইউনিয়ন, এবং ক্যান্ডিডেট ইনটু অন অ্যান অ্যাভারেজ 4-5 জন যদি করে ধরেন, কত ক্যান্ডিডেট হবে আপনারা বুঝে নেন। তারপরে এত উপজেলা 595টা, 495টা উপজেলা, ডিস্ট্রিক্ট কাউন্সিল আছে আমাদের, জেলা 61 হবে, তো ওই 3টা তো হয় না, হিলটে 3টা হয় না, 100 ডিস্ট্রিক্ট কাউন্সিল আছে। তারপরে ধরেন আমাদের আবার এই যে সিটি কর্পোরেশন আছে, এখন 13টা, বগুড়া সহ 13টা, তারপর 330টা পৌরসভা, এগুলো সব ইলেকশন করতে হবে। সুতরাং হিউজ টাস্ক অ্যাহেড, উই হ্যাভ হিউজ টাস্ক অ্যাহেড। এখানে আপনাদের সহযোগিতা আরও বেশি করে দরকার। আমাদের চেষ্টার কোনো ঘাটতি থাকবে না, দ্যাট আই ক্যান অ্যাসিওর ইউ। আমরা সর্বতভাবে চেষ্টা করে যাব। সুতরাং আমাদের চেষ্টার সাথে আপনাদের সহযোগিতা যোগ হলে আমরা আশা করি ইনশাল্লাহ দেশের স্বার্থে, সবার স্বার্থে, গণতন্ত্রের স্বার্থে, গণতন্ত্র শুধু ন্যাশনাল লেভেলে হইলে হয় না, গণতন্ত্র তো ওই তৃণমূলে যেতে হবে। ওই গণতন্ত্র আরও বেশি গুরুত্বপূর্ণ, কারণ ওনার একদম সরাসরি সার্ভিস দেন মানুষকে। ওই যে আমাদের যে লোকাল গভর্নমেন্ট ইউনিয়ন কাউন্সিল যারা আছেন, তারা কিন্তু ডাইরেক্টলি ইনভলভড ইন গিভিং সার্ভিস টু দ্য লোকাল পিপল। ওই সরকারের যে কেন্দ্রীয় সেন্টারে যে গণতান্ত্রিক সরকার থাকে, তাদের যে যে জিনিসগুলো সেবাগুলো যায়, এগুলো এদের মাধ্যমে কিন্তু মানুষের কাছে পৌঁছায়। সুতরাং ওটা মোর ইম্পর্টেন্ট, কিন্তু লোকাল গভর্নমেন্টটা মোর ইম্পর্টেন্ট। দ্যাট ইজ হোয়াট উই হ্যাভ টু অলসো কনসিডার। ওটা বিবেচনা রেখে আমরা কিন্তু আমাদের উই স্টিল হ্যাভ দি উইল, পারপাস এবং কমিটমেন্ট of the same standard that we had in the national election. এখানে কিন্তু আপনাদের সহযোগিতা লাগবে। আমি সেদিন কালকে দেখলাম, আই হ্যাভ সিন ইন দ্য মিডিয়া, যে সুশাসনের জন্য নাগরিক বদিউল আলম মজুমদার সাহেব সুজনকে কোট করে এটা দিয়েছে, 2016 সালের ইলেকশনে 236 জন খুন হয়েছে, মার্ডার 236 সমান। 2000, তারপরে ওই আইন ও সালিশ কেন্দ্রকে রেফার করে দিয়েছে একটা পত্রিকায়, যে 2021 সালে ইউনিয়ন কাউন্সিলে, শুধু ইউনিয়ন কাউন্সিল ইলেকশনে 113 জন খুন হয়েছে, 113 জন খুন হয়েছে। দেখেন, মানে so many killings take place during local government elections historically. প্রেসিডেন্ট এরশাদের সময় না 80s-এ লোকাল গভর্নমেন্ট ইলেকশন হয়েছিল, আমাদের আত্মীয় স্বজনও কন্টেস্ট করেছিল, আমি দেখেছি। শুধু মার্ডার নাম্বারটা বলতে পারবো না, অনেক তো মার্ডার হয়েছেই। আর অল দ্য হসপিটালস আর ফুল অফ ইনজুর্ড পিপল, এই লোকাল গভর্নমেন্টের এই মারামারির জন্য। এই জিনিস থামাইতে হবে ভাই, এই জিনিস থামানোটা একটা বড় চ্যালেঞ্জ হিসেবে দেখা দিয়েছে। কিন্তু আমরা কোনো রক্তপাত চাই না, এই রক্তপাতহীন একটা লোকাল গভর্নমেন্ট ইলেকশন আমরা দিতে চাই, সুন্দরভাবে একটা ইলেকশনটা কন্ডাক্ট করতে চাই, এবং আপনাদের সহযোগিতা চাই। আপনারা দয়া করে জাতিকে ঐক্যবদ্ধ করার চেষ্টা করুন। আমরা ওই যে ক্যাম্পেইন, অ্যাওয়ারনেস ক্যাম্পেইন উইথ দ্য কোঅপারেশন অফ আওয়ার ডেভেলপমেন্ট পার্টনার্স, আমরা অ্যাওয়ারনেস ক্যাম্পেইনটা জোরে সোরে চালু করব, স্টেক হোল্ডারদের সাথে কথা বলবো, সবাইকে মোবিলাইজ করার চেষ্টা করব, সবাইকে একত্রিত করার চেষ্টা করব, যাতে করে আমরা এই ধরনের সংঘাত এড়িয়ে একটা সুন্দর নির্বাচন, স্থানীয় সরকার নির্বাচন আমরা দিতে পারি, সেটা আমরা চেষ্টা করব। এখানে কথা হচ্ছে লোন ডিফল্টারের কথা হচ্ছে, আমি এই নিয়ে কোনো বক্তব্য দিতে চাই না, কারণ কারণ হলো যে এটা হাইয়েস্ট জুডিশিয়ারি সুপ্রিম কোর্টের অ্যাপিলেট ডিভিশনে এই লোনের বিষয় নিয়ে দুইটা মামলা বিবেচনাধীন আছে। এখানে আমার কমেন্ট করা ঠিক হবে না, এখানে এই জন্য আমি কমেন্ট করতে চাই না। তবে আমরা চেরি ফিক করি না, এইটুকু শুধু বলতে পারি, উই ট্রাই টু ফলো দ্য ল, but the ultimate decision will come from the Supreme Court. So that's why I don't like to pass any comment on the loan defaulters case. আমি আরেকটা জিনিস বলবো, যে কাউন্টিং, অ্যাবাউট দ্য কাউন্টিং প্রসেস। আমরা 42,700 মতো সেন্টার, সব রেজাল্ট আমাদের ওয়েবসাইটে আছে, সেন্টার ওয়াইজ ওয়েবসাইটে রেজাল্ট আছে। দয়া করে টেল দি এজেন্টস যারা সেন্টারে ছিল, সাইন শিখতে আছে, ওখানে রেজাল্ট যে অ্যানাউন্স করেছে এজেন্ডা ছিল তো, একটু দয়া করে মিলিয়ে নেন যে সেন্টার ওয়াইজ যে রেজাল্ট ওয়েবসাইটে আছে, আপনাদের যে সাইন শিট আছে মিলে কিনা দেখেন, দেন you can see whether there is any discrepancy in the counting process or not while consolidating the result. কনসলিডেশনটা আমরা তো সব অনলাইনে শেষ করে দিতাম, শুধু পারি নাই তো পোস্টাল ব্যালটের জন্য, ভোটের জন্য আমাদেরকে রিটার্নিং অফিসারের অফিসে ওই যে এটা কনসলিডেশনটা করতে হয়েছে বিকজ অফ দ্য পোস্টাল ভোট না হলে তো আমরা বলতাম যে সব অনলাইনে, ওই রিটার্নিং অফিসার অনলাইনে দিত, রিটার্নিং অফিসার অনলাইনে দিয়ে দিত, কাগজ কলমে আর কোনো কাটাকাটিরও প্রশ্ন উঠতো না, লেখালেখিরও প্রশ্ন আসতো না। দ্যাট ইজ হোয়াট উই ওয়ান্টেড টু ডু, কিন্তু পারি নাই বিকজ পোস্টাল ব্যালট আসবে, এগুলো গুনতে হবে, এটা যোগ করতে হবে। এই যোগ করার বিষয়টা এখানে রয়ে গেছে, এই জন্য আমাদেরকে একটু হয়েছে, এই নাহলে আমরা সব কিছু অনলাইন করে ফেলতাম। আমি এগ্রি করি ডক্টর আলিমের সাথে, ওটা আমারও আছে, উই হ্যাভ টু ওয়ার্ক অন দিস, যে নাম্বার অফ পুলিং প্রিসাইডিং অফিসার রেশিও মেল ফিমেল অ্যান্ড অলসো দি ভোট কাস্ট মেল ফিমেল রেশিও, উই হ্যাভ টু ওয়ার্ক অন দিস, এবং ইটস এ গুড ইস্যু ইউ হ্যাভ রেজড, অ্যান্ড এই ইস্যু নিয়ে আমরা অলরেডি ডিসকাস করেছি, কিন্তু এই ইস্যু নিয়ে আমরা ডিসকাস করেছি। তখন আশা করি ইনশাল্লাহ নেক্সট ইলেকশন you will probably find something concrete in this area. আরেকটা জিনিস বলি, আমরা তো আপনি তো জানেন এখন আমরা স্টেক হোল্ডার্স কনফারেন্স করতেছি, ফিডব্যাক কী অভিজ্ঞতা হলো এই ইলেকশনে, আমাদের কী কী অভিজ্ঞতা হলো, কী কী গ্যাপস আমরা আইডেন্টিফাই করলাম, কোথায় কোথায় আমাদের ইমপ্রুভমেন্টস করতে হবে, এগুলো আমরা আইডেন্টিফাই করে আমরা একটা মোটামুটিভাবে একটা আগামী, কারণ একটা ইলেকশন কমিশন দুইটা ন্যাশনাল ইলেকশন করতে পারে না, ও 5 বছর পর হওয়ার কথা, তো তারা পারে না, ওই একটা করে গিয়ে বিদায় হয়ে যায়, পরের নতুন ইলেকশন কমিশন আসে, তারা নতুন করে শুরু করে। এই জন্য আমরা তাদের জন্য রেখে যেতে চাই যে আমাদের অভিজ্ঞতা কী হলো, কীভাবে আমরা ইলেকশনটা করলাম, কী কী চ্যালেঞ্জেস ফেস করলাম, তাদেরকে কী কী এরিয়াতে কাজ করতে হবে, এগুলো আমরা সব ডকুমেন্ট করে রেখে যাবো ইনশাল্লাহ, যাতে নেক্সট কমিশন ক্যান ইজিলি আন্ডারটেক দোজ ইনিশিয়েটিভস অ্যান্ড ইমপ্রুভ দ্য সিস্টেম। এনিওয়ে, অনেক বক্তব্য হয়ে গেল, লম্বা হয়ে গেল, যদিও ব্রিফলি বলার চেষ্টা করেছিলাম। ব্রিফলি বলতে গেলে আমার শুধু থ্যাংক ইউ দিয়ে শেষ করতে হয়, আর যদি লম্বা করতে হলে থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ বললে হয়ে যেত, কিন্তু কিছু কথা না বললে আমাদের সাংবাদিক ভাইরা তারা তো লিখতে হবে কিছু, এই জন্য কিছু বলতে হয়, লিখে বললাম। তবে আপনাদের কোঅপারেশন চাই, আমরা মাসিভ ভোটার এডুকেশন প্রোগ্রামে যাব ইনশাল্লাহ উইথ দ্য কোঅপারেশন অফ আওয়ার ডেভেলপমেন্ট পার্টনার্স, ডেফিনেটলি স্টেক হোল্ডারদের সাথে কথা বলবো, এবং আমরা বিশেষ করে পলিটিক্যাল পার্টির সাপোর্ট খুবই দরকার, রাজনৈতিক দলগুলোর সাপোর্ট ছাড়া ইটস নট পসিবল যে একটা সংঘাতহীন লোকাল গভর্নমেন্ট ইলেকশন ডেলিভার করা। কারণ আমি সংঘাত বলছি কেন, আমি ইতিহাস ঘাটে দেখছি ইলেকশনের, লোকাল গভর্নমেন্ট ইলেকশনে এটা কেন জানি এটা একটা হয় আন্ডার হোয়াট এভার গভর্নমেন্ট ইট ওয়াজ, কিন্তু এই ধরনের একটা সংঘাতপূর্ণ ইলেকশনগুলো হয়। তো ইনশাল্লাহ আশা করি যেহেতু একটা জাতীয় নির্বাচন আমরা ডেলিভার করতে পেরেছি, আশা করি ইনশাল্লাহ এই লোকাল গভর্নমেন্টও আমরা পারবো ইনশাল্লাহ আপনাদের সবাই সহযোগিতা নিয়ে। এটা আমার সেই বিশ্বাস, সেই আত্মবিশ্বাস আমাদের আছে। তো আপনাদের সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ। চেষ্টা করবো ইনশাল্লাহ, চেষ্টা করবো, আমাদের কমিটমেন্ট আছে, চেষ্টা আছে। কারণ আমরা ইলেকশন কমিশনে আমরা কারো পক্ষেও না, কারো বিপক্ষেও না, বুঝতে পেরেছেন? আমরা সবার জন্য একটা সুন্দর পরিবেশ সৃষ্টি করতে চাই, যেখানে মানুষ ভোট দিতে পারবে এবং সেফলি বাড়ি যেতে পারবে। তা আশা করি আমরা জাতীয় পর্যায়েরটা, এখন আমরা তো উই হ্যাভ সেট অ্যান স্ট্যান্ডার্ড ইন দ্য ইলেকশন, এইটা আমাদের বটম লাইন হয়ে গেছে এখন, এটা বটম লাইন হয়ে গেছে। সুতরাং এটাকে আমাদেরকে ইমপ্রুভ করার চেষ্টা করতে হবে, যেখানে যেখানে গ্যাপস আছে আমরা এটা চেষ্টা করবো ইনশাল্লাহ। আশা করি সবার সহযোগিতা নিয়ে আমরা না শুনেন, আমি এটা বলি নাই যে অন্তর্বর্তী চাপ ছিল না বলেই সম্ভব হয়েছে, এটা না, চাপ ছিল না সেটা বলতেছি, ছিল না বলেই যে এটা সম্ভব হয়েছে সেটা না। ইট ইজ ওয়ান অফ দি, আমি বলেছি যে গভর্নমেন্ট ইজ এ মেজর স্টেক হোল্ডার ইন দ্য ইলেকশন। গভর্নমেন্টের সহযোগিতা ছাড়া সম্ভব হয় না এটা কোনো, কারণ গভর্নমেন্টের সব এজেন্সি তো আমার কাজে লাগে। পুলিশ, সামরিক বাহিনী থেকে আরম্ভ করে সব তো গভর্নমেন্টের লোকই, প্রশাসন থেকে আরম্ভ করে সব তো গভর্নমেন্টের লোক। এই জন্য গভর্নমেন্ট ছাড়া তো আমার চলবে না। ইন্টারিম গভর্নমেন্ট থেকে এই সাপোর্টটা আমরা পেয়েছি, এই কথাটা বলেছি। এই কথা বলছি যে ইন্টারিম গভর্নমেন্ট গেভ আস দ্যাট সাপোর্ট। আমরা যে সাপোর্টটা চেয়েছি তারা সেটা দিয়েছেন। আমাদের সাকসেসফুল কমপ্লিশন অফ দি ইলেকশনের মধ্যে তাদের অবদান অবশ্যই আছে। এই সাপোর্টটা না পেলে পারতাম না, এইটাই বলেছি আমরা। তা আশা করি ইনশাল্লাহ একটা গণতান্ত্রিক পরিবেশ এট অল লেভেলস আমরা সৃষ্টি করতে পারবো। এখানে আমাদের রাজনীতিবিদদেরও তো আছে, তারাও তো দেশের জন্য চিন্তা করে, তারাও তো দেশের জন্য ভাবে, তারাও দেশের মঙ্গলের জন্য চিন্তা করে। সুতরাং সবাই যখন চিন্তা করে যে দেশের ভালো চায়, তো সবাই মিলেই তো ইনশাল্লাহ আমরা একটা ভালো ইলেকশন দিতে পারবো, সেই বিশ্বাস আমাদের। এখনো তো কোনো এই সরকারের অধীনে কোনো ইলেকশন তো আমরা করি নাই। সুতরাং ইট ইজ টু আর্লি টু প্রেডিক্ট। এবং আমি তো বলেছি নিজে যে প্রত্যেকটা লোকাল গভর্নমেন্টের খুনাখুনি হয়, এই খুনাখুনিটা যাতে না হয় সেটার জন্য সবার সহযোগিতা নিয়ে আমরা ফাইট করবো, সেটাই চেষ্টা করতেছি। এবং সেটাই আমাদের একটা লক্ষ্য। এখন কোনো ধরনের যাতে রক্তপাত না হয়, সেটাই আমাদের একটা মূল লক্ষ্য থাকবে ইনশাল্লাহ। এখন ইন্টারিম গভর্নমেন্ট বা ডেমোক্রেটিক গভর্নমেন্ট বা এই সরকারকে তো জনগণ ভোট দিয়ে বানিয়েছে, জনগণের প্রতিনিধিত্ব তারা দে রিপ্রেজেন্ট দ্য পিপল অফ দ্য কান্ট্রি। সুতরাং তারাও তো দেশের তো মঙ্গল তো ডেফিনেটলি চাইবে। এটা তো যে কোনো গভর্নমেন্ট যারা রিপ্রেজেন্ট করে, জনগণকে রিপ্রেজেন্ট করে, একটা ডেমোক্রেটিক গভর্নমেন্ট ইজ ইন পাওয়ার। কিন্তু তারা তো ডেফিনেটলি আমাদের বিশ্বাস যে তারা এটা ডেফিনেটলি চাইবে যে একটা সুন্দর নির্বাচন হোক, স্বচ্ছ নির্বাচন হোক, তাদেরও ক্রেডিবিলিটি বাড়বে, এটা তারা তো চাইবেই। সুতরাং আমার মনে হয় না ইনশাল্লাহ সবার সহযোগিতা থাকলে এই ইলেকশনটা চ্যালেঞ্জিং হবে, ডেফিনেটলি নো ডাউট অ্যাবাউট ইট, অ্যাজ হিস্ট্রি সেজ। কিন্তু এই চ্যালেঞ্জ আমরা ইনশাল্লাহ মোকাবেলা করার জন্য আমরা প্রস্তুতি নিচ্ছি এবং সর্বাত্মক প্রস্তুতি নিচ্ছি এই চ্যালেঞ্জ মোকাবেলা করার জন্য। আপনাদের ধন্যবাদ। ধন্যবাদ সবাইকে, ধন্যবাদ। থ্যাংক ইউ আনফ্রেল। থ্যাংক ইউ। Thank you.
You careful when you go down.
Again, I would like to thank the Election Commission of Bangladesh, the development partners, the members from the diplomatic community, and members of the media for joining with us today. With that, we will conclude today's the media conference and then the launch of ANFREL final report of International Election Observation Mission for 2026 general election and referendum. So I would also like to invite you, there are snacks outside, so you can enjoy that as well.